For years, Sasha Banks was one of WWE's main cornerstones and one of the most important stars the company relied on. A history-making champion, a fan favorite, and one of the main faces of the women's revolution.
90 seconds remaining!
Almost overnight she was gone, with no farewell and no real closure, leaving behind only questions, rumors, and silence.
It wasn't our friendship that wasn't stopped.
Now, with Sasha finally speaking out, the truth behind her WWE exit is starting to come into focus.
So many bad things just kept happening, and I didn't know how to deal with them.
And it was far more complicated than anyone expected. So let's dive into her story. Long before the arenas, championships, and the chance to declare, "This is my house," Sasha Banks was just Mercedes Kastner-Varadu, a kid growing up without stability. Her childhood was anything but easy, and because of her brother's autism and medical needs, her family moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough to feel rooted. Schools kept changing, friends came and went, homes were temporary, and for a long time, wrestling became her escape, a world where chaos made sense and larger-than-life characters turned pain into power.
Oh my God! Surprise!
Mercedes discovered wrestling at a young age, watching Eddie Guerrero matches and instantly connecting with the emotion, storytelling, and struggle. Eddie wasn't just a wrestler to her. He was proof that someone could come from nothing, fight the system, and still become unforgettable, and that influence would shape everything she became. At just 17, she began training at Chaotic Wrestling in Massachusetts, smaller than most, inexperienced, and constantly underestimated. Promoters didn't see a future star, they saw a risk, but Mercedes had something that couldn't be taught: intensity. She threw herself into training, absorbing the craft obsessively, refining her character, her movement, and her presence, and slowly she began building a reputation on the independent scene under the name Mercedes KV.
Women's Champion, Mercedes KV!
That grind paid off in 2012 when WWE came calling, and Mercedes signed with WWE's developmental territory, NXT, where she was given a new name, Sasha Banks. At first, nothing about her screamed future megastar. She wasn't immediately pushed, lost matches, and often played side roles, but behind the scenes she was studying everyone, how they walked, talked, and commanded attention. Then came the transformation. Sasha reinvented herself as the Boss, a character full of swagger, confidence, and attitude, complete with chains, sunglasses, and a walk that announced she owned every room she entered. It wasn't arrogance, it was armor, a persona built to protect the real woman who had spent her life being overlooked. Once that switch flipped, there was no turning back. In NXT, Sasha Banks didn't just rise, she changed the game. Her rivalry with Bayley became one of the most celebrated feuds in modern wrestling history, and their matches at NXT TakeOver, Brooklyn and Respect weren't just great women's matches, they were great wrestling matches, proving that women could main event, steal shows, and carry emotional storytelling at the highest level.
90 seconds remaining!
By 2015, Sasha was no longer just a prospect, she was a movement. When she debuted on WWE's main roster as part of the Four Horsewomen alongside Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, and Bayley, expectations were sky high. Fans saw her as the future, the wrestler who could finally break the mold, while WWE saw star power, money, and legitimacy. Sasha Banks wasn't just arriving in WWE, she was arriving to change it, and for a while, it looked like she would. By the time she fully broke into the main roster spotlight, she wasn't just another call-up from NXT, she was a symbol of change. WWE was entering what it proudly branded the women's evolution, and Sasha was positioned right at the center of it. Unlike some overnight success stories, her rise was built on momentum, pressure, and almost impossible expectations.
And Sasha, backstabber, looking for the bank statement.
For many fans, that was the night Sasha Banks became undeniable, and championships soon followed. She became a multiple-time Raw Women's Champion, constantly positioned near the top of the card, and even when she lost the title quickly, a pattern fans would later criticize heavily, WWE still relied on her to make moments feel important. If the division needed credibility, Sasha was the one they turned to, but her impact went far beyond title reigns. She became a cultural force, representing a generation of fans who finally saw themselves reflected in WWE, and she was vocal about her inspirations, her love for wrestling history, and her desire to push boundaries. Sasha wasn't just wrestling for wins, she wrestled to prove something, and audiences felt that authenticity. That connection reached another level when she transitioned into high-profile tag team success. when WWE reintroduced the Women's Tag Team Championships, Sasha teamed with Bayley, rekindling their legendary NXT chemistry, and together they became the inaugural champions, a moment that felt long overdue for two women who had helped define modern WWE. As champions, Sasha and Bayley weren't treated like an afterthought. They defended the titles across Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, something almost unheard of for women's tag teams at the time, and Sasha became the first woman to hold both a singles and tag team championships simultaneously, reinforcing her status as one of WWE's most versatile performers. Then came 2020, arguably the most important year of Sasha Banks's WWE career. In the middle of the pandemic era, with empty arenas and enormous uncertainty, WWE needed reliable stars, and Sasha stepped up. Her slow-burn storyline with Bayley evolved into one of the most emotionally rich feuds in years, turning from dominance into jealousy, tension, and betrayal. Classic wrestling storytelling executed at an elite level. At Hell in a Cell 2020, Sasha defeated Bayley to finally capture the SmackDown Women's Championship in a brutal, emotionally charged match.
And Sasha staying in it at baseball slide.
For fans, it felt like vindication. After years of short reigns and near misses, Sasha had finally conquered one of her biggest challenges. That same year, she reached a milestone few wrestlers, male or female, ever achieve. She main event WrestleMania. At WrestleMania 37, Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair closed Night 1, becoming the first two black women to headline the biggest show in wrestling history. The imagery was powerful, the emotion was real, and Sasha, standing across the ring from Bianca, knew exactly what that moment represented. She wasn't just wrestling a match, she was cementing a legacy. The match itself was outstanding, hard-hitting, dramatic, and deeply personal. Though Sasha lost the championship to Bianca, her role in elevating Belair to superstardom was undeniable. She didn't just make Bianca look good, she made her success feel inevitable, the mark of a true top star. Around this time, Sasha's star power expanded beyond WWE. In 2020, she made her acting debut in The Mandalorian, portraying Casca Reeves in the Star Wars universe, and almost overnight became a crossover star. Wrestling fans were proud, non-wrestling audiences intrigued, and WWE had a performer who could bridge worlds with athletic credibility, mainstream appeal, and cultural relevance. On paper, Sasha Banks had everything: championships, history-making moments, main events, crossover fame, and fan loyalty. She had reached the peak, but behind the scenes, cracks were forming. Despite her accomplishments, her booking remained inconsistent. Title reigns were often short, momentum frequently stalled, and creative direction shifted without warning. While WWE praised her publicly, reports suggested Sasha was increasingly frustrated with how women, especially tag teams, were being handled. By the time Sasha Banks and Naomi became women's tag team champions in 2022, it felt like a full-circle moment. But it would also become the beginning of the end, because when you climb to the top, you start to see everything that's broken. Then came the turning point, the walkout that changed everything. By early 2022, Sasha Banks had already given nearly a decade of her life to WWE. She had main event WrestleMania, carried championships, elevated others, and pushed women's wrestling into spaces it had never been allowed to occupy before. On the surface, she was one of WWE's most accomplished female stars, but behind the curtain, her relationship with the company had been deteriorating for years. Those close to her would later suggest her frustrations weren't sudden, they were cumulative. Creative promises made and broken, long-term plans scrapped without explanation, tag team wrestling treated as a temporary experiment rather than a serious division, and perhaps most importantly, a growing feeling that her voice simply didn't matter. All of that came to a head on May 16, 2022, a night WWE didn't see coming. On that episode of Monday Night Raw, Sasha Banks and Naomi walked into the arena as the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions, scheduled to compete in a six-pack challenge main event where the winner would earn a future Raw Women's Championship match against Bianca Belair. According to multiple reports, Sasha and Naomi had serious concerns about the match, not a refusal to work or ego, but a creative direction issue. They believed the match made the women's tag team titles feel like secondary props rather than true prizes. As champions, they felt their role should be to build the division, not act as placeholders in a single storyline. They reportedly voiced concerns that the tag titles were being undermined yet again, something Sasha had fought against since the belts were introduced. Sasha Banks, in particular, had been outspoken backstage about wanting the tag team division to mean something. She had helped bring those titles into existence, and now she felt they were being treated like an inconvenience. When their concerns weren't addressed, Sasha and Naomi made a decision few wrestlers ever dared to make. They walked away. According to WWE's own statement, Sasha Banks and Naomi placed the Women's Tag Team Championship belts on the desk of Head of Talent Relations John Laurinaitis and left the building, and within hours, WWE went public, making their statement loud and clear. They fired the first shot. During SmackDown that same week, Michael Cole delivered a now infamous statement on commentary, saying the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions had walked off the show and out of the building during Monday Night Raw, and that their actions had disappointed millions of fans and fellow superstars. The wording was deliberate. WWE framed the situation not as a creative disagreement, but as a betrayal of fans, co-workers, and the company itself. Sasha Banks and Naomi were suspended indefinitely, the tag titles were vacated, and a tournament was announced to crown new champions. In WWE's version of events, this was about professionalism, but among wrestlers and industry insiders, the narrative didn't quite add up. Almost immediately, support began pouring in, quietly at first, then publicly. Several wrestlers reportedly sympathized with Sasha and Naomi, even if they couldn't say so outright, while former WWE stars who had experienced creative frustration themselves were far more vocal. The first on the list was Bayley, who didn't directly comment on the walkout itself but made it clear she stood with Sasha on a personal level, posting a message fans interpreted as supportive: "Remember, follow your heart, kid, and you'll never go wrong." Veteran WWE mainstay Dolph Ziggler also showed support in his own way, posting a throwback photo with Sasha and Naomi on social media, which fans saw as encouragement during a contentious period. Then there was former WWE and current AEW superstar CM Punk, who publicly expressed his support for Sasha and Naomi, drawing parallels between their walkout and his own historic departure from WWE. Punk told the media he felt solidarity, saying he would support them 100% because he had personally walked out on WWE years earlier and understood the frustrations talent can feel within the company.
Wayne is in the main event of WrestleMania next year, and I'm not, makes me sick.
He summed it up perfectly when he said you can't criticize someone for standing up for themselves if you've never done it yourself, and that sentiment echoed across social media and interviews. Sasha wasn't being seen as difficult by her peers, she was being seen as brave, and that distinction mattered because she wasn't walking out on a random episode of Raw, she was walking out on a system she felt had stopped listening. 4 months after the walkout, Sasha said nothing publicly. No tweets, no interviews, no cryptic posts. WWE reportedly froze her contract, extending it to account for time not worked, a common tactic that effectively trapped her in limbo. Behind the scenes, however, talks were happening, and reports suggested Sasha had asked for a new contract, one that would place her on the same pay scale as Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. Considering her resume, mainstream appeal, and ability to elevate others, the request didn't seem unreasonable, yet negotiations went nowhere. Whether it was money, creative control, or respect, something wasn't aligning, and for the first time in her career, Sasha didn't blink. By the end of 2022, her WWE contract expired, and she was definitely gone. But there was meaning behind the silence. When Sasha finally began speaking indirectly, the picture became clearer. In interviews and podcasts, allies emphasized one recurring theme: you can't lead people somewhere you've never gone. When CM Punk spoke about solidarity with Sasha, noting that while he wasn't a woman and couldn't fully understand her experiences, he knew exactly how that environment could wear you down, especially if you dared to push back. Sasha's silence, therefore, wasn't a weakness, it was a strategy. Sasha let WWE tell its version first, knowing the truth would eventually surface. At the heart of her departure was one specific issue fans had been complaining about for years: WWE's inconsistent treatment of women's wrestling. Yes, WWE branded the Evolution, and yes, women main event WrestleMania, but behind the marketing, old habits lingered. Tag teams were created and dissolved overnight, long-term storytelling was rare, and champions were often beaten in non-title matches. When creative plans changed, wrestlers weren't always informed and were expected to adapt silently with no say. Sasha Banks wasn't built that way. She was deeply invested in storytelling, legacy, and making moments truly matter.
Wow, this is so crazy. It still feels like a dream.
To her, being women's tag team champion wasn't a side quest. It was a responsibility, and when WWE treated it otherwise, she took it personally. Another factor often overlooked was timing. By 2022, WWE was in transition. Vince McMahon was still in creative control, but cracks were forming internally, wrestlers were being released en masse, morale was shaky, and trust was thin. Sasha Banks had survived multiple eras of WWE, adapting and compromising along the way, but eventually, compromise becomes surrender, and she wasn't willing to surrender anymore. When she finally re-emerged, not in WWE but in New Japan Pro Wrestling, the message was loud and clear. At Wrestle Kingdom 17, she debuted as Mercedes Moné, no explanation or apology required. Her presence alone said everything. This wasn't a wrestler running from WWE, it was an artist reclaiming her agency. Stripping away the corporate statements, suspensions, and headlines, Sasha Banks' exit boiled down to three things: respect, creative integrity, and control over her own career. She didn't leave because she hated WWE. She left because she loved wrestling too much to keep compromising her vision, sending a message that echoed far beyond one company. Top stars don't just entertain, they decide. Now that the dust has settled, Sasha Banks' life after WWE tells a very different story than many critics predicted. Far from disappearing after walking away from the biggest wrestling company in the world, she reinvented herself on her own terms and arguably expanded her legacy beyond the ring. Shortly after her WWE contract officially expired at the end of 2022, she re-emerged under a new name, Mercedes Moné. Her debut at Wrestle Kingdom 17 in January 2023 sent shockwaves through the wrestling world. Walking into the Tokyo Dome and confronting IWGP Women's Champion Kairi, Mercedes instantly proved she was still a global star, capable of commanding attention without WWE's machine behind her. The move wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Japan represented creative freedom, prestige, and a wrestling-first environment that aligned perfectly with what she had been fighting for all along. At this moment, she signaled that she wasn't done making history. She was just done doing it under someone else's rules. In NJPW and later Stardom, Mercedes Moné embraced a harder-hitting, athletic style, reminding fans why she was once called the Standard. She captured the IWGP Women's Championship, further cementing her legacy as one of the most accomplished women's wrestlers of her generation. Her matches felt personal again, less scripted and more expressive, and many fans noted that she looked genuinely happy in the ring, something that had been questioned during her later WWE years. Beyond wrestling, Mercedes' career continued to flourish. Her role as Casca Reeves in The Mandalorian opened doors in Hollywood, proving she wasn't just a wrestler crossing over for novelty but a performer with real screen presence. Acting became another avenue of self-expression, one that WWE could never fully offer her, and she has since been vocal about carefully choosing projects in film and television that align with her long-term vision rather than quick exposure. On a personal level, Mercedes has been refreshingly open about her mental health journey, speaking about burnout, anxiety, and the emotional toll of constantly fighting for respect in an environment that didn't always listen. Walking away, she said, wasn't just about wrestling, it was about self-preservation. Reclaiming her identity outside of the boss allowed her to rediscover who she was without the pressure of weekly television, creative battles, and public scrutiny. Today, Mercedes Moné stands as a symbol of something bigger than one company. She represents a modern wrestler who understands her value, her brand, and her limits. She didn't leave WWE because she couldn't handle the spotlight. She left because she wanted to control it, and in doing so, she carved out a future where success isn't defined by one ring, one title, or one corporation. Sasha Banks didn't just walk out of WWE, she walked into a life where her voice finally mattered. Was leaving WWE the best move Sasha Banks ever made? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and before you leave, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next ones.